maintain his place in the squad now, actually, with Carlos Soler there to pressure him.
Yeah, I found it interesting, yours and Cal's conversation on the breakdown about it, and then following on extra time as well. And I think Dan Silver asked something which I think he came down kind of similarly to how you did. Found myself furiously nodding along to the analysis of Paqueta's poor decision-making versus Fulham. In my opinion, this has been evident flaw of his game throughout his time with us. Do you think that's more to do with the role he's been asked to play, both historically under Moyes and now under Lopetegui, or the player himself?
Well, I think if we go back to the start, right, and he's played most of his West Ham career under Moyes, only a few games under Lopetegui, we can see someone that's really been thought of and used as an almost fix-all in midfield, perhaps less so when Declan Rice was in there, but certainly even more last season with Edson Alvarez and Thomas Souček in midfield with him. Sometimes James Ward-Prowse as well, but Ward-Prowse not being the most progressive of midfielders, more of a ticket over guy in the middle than someone who really progresses at a high rate. So I think we can think of Paqueta as someone that's really been used to turn defence into attack a lot of the time. And when you're looking back to a lot of the situations in which we attacked under Moyes, we really focused on those transitional moments and our counter-attacks, which means, a lot of his actions have been centred around being as high risk and as sort of high value as possible. So his mindset a lot of the time when he's got the ball is how quickly can I find a dangerous player in an advanced position. And he's had a lot of pressure on him because it's not just been about receiving the ball in deeper areas and progressing for us. It's also been about then being the guy that's going to get forward into the final third and then also try and play the final pass quite often as well. So, a high risk, high value, high volume progressor, but then also a high risk, high value creator in the final third. And the thing that really is the takeaway from both of those elements is that in both cases it's high risk. And I think that's really been central to his role. We saw probably him function a little bit better under Moyes when he was moved out to the left and was able to generate some better combinative short play with Emerson, and was able to drift into dangerous areas, dismark effectively, and therefore probably meant that his actions were a little bit more accurate in general when he was doing it from the left, and also got him out of some defensive situations that he has found challenging at times in the centre of the pitch. I mean, we just referred to how he struggled sometimes in the duels, or a lot in the duels against Fulham. So yeah, he's had a very challenging and busy and high risk role under David Moyes, and there's a lot of change really with what Julen Lopetegui is asking him to do.
So then how does that change then on the Lopetegui, right? Because, like you say, the style, although not completely the opposite, is very significantly different, especially for someone like him and what he's trying to do.
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, we're not throwing our counter-attacking threat and our counter-attacking ability out the window completely. We still want to be an effective side in transition, and we've still got a lot of players who are really good in those moments. Kudus and Bowen are probably two of the league's best, really, in counter-attacking situations. So it's not something that we want to lose completely, and Paqueta will still be really important to us in those counter-attacking moments to get the ball forward nice and quickly and into dangerous positions as quickly as possible. But there is a lot more kind of intricate deep build-up work that's going to happen under Lopetegui. When you look at how the team is set up under Lopetegui, we're entering much more of a sort of 3-2 build-up shape a lot of the time. So Edson Alvarez dropping between the centre-backs, we've seen that a lot. The centre-backs splitting, and then your number 10 dropping off into deeper midfield areas alongside someone like Guido Rodriguez. And the idea really being that you can circulate possession much more effectively and build up attacks that generate some sort of pressure and momentum and allow you to control the game better with the ball. Perhaps, interestingly, really, perhaps the best time we've seen that happen so far was in the second half against Manchester City, which is certainly not the team that you would anticipate it functioning at its best level against. But yeah, we saw some of those moments in that game and saw it going quite well. But that does mean that you need Paqueta in those situations when he's playing that role in deeper midfield to be sometimes a little bit lower risk. He's not going to need to play the most difficult pass every time he gets it. He's not going to need to force it forward every single time he gets it. And actually there's a slightly different role there where he needs to be a little bit more focused on retention at times and just helping the team out in terms of controlling the game and moving the ball around effectively side to side in the middle as well. So yeah, I think there's that key difference in terms of how he functions in build up. Although he will still be asked to often be the guy that maybe takes us from first phase or second phase build up through into sort of attack and into dangerous positions. He's still going to be the guy that's playing those passes a lot of the time, and maybe that is a slight worry with the blend of midfielders at the club at the moment. Is there probably isn't someone who can do both pretty effectively. We've got some really good defensive midfielders, and we've got some really good quite offensive midfielders, but not someone that's that can kind of do a bit of what Paqueta is able to do, where he's maybe a little bit more capable of moving across both of those different areas and helping out in both senses. So that does still leave quite a lot of pressure on him. And then in the final third, yeah, it's different. The way that we're approaching the final third it is different, and there are going to be situations that are completely different to those that he's encountered previously, where it's not always the most difficult pass that needs to be played. Sometimes the passes that he can play in those situations are going to be a lot more simple. And I suppose the best way to start to look at that is to look at how the team is shaped and actually where you're able to generate overloads. So a lot of what we've been talking about on the Patreon so far is how teams have been using maybe front fives in possession to overload our back four, which means it can be difficult for us to control that fifth player wherever they appear. So a lot of the time in the Aston Villa game, it was Lucas Paqueta who was joining the front line, and we were really struggling to control that overlap on the left side. We didn't know whether to drop Bowen in. It meant there was always this free player for them to access. It was a really good way to escape from build-up. And then we saw actually the winning goal in that game came from Mathiasen overlapping on that side and cutting the ball back. And this is generally a really effective route to generating chances. We see a lot of teams operating with kind of a front five now when they arrive in the final third. And actually, it's something that we're going to see a lot more at West Ham. And there are a lot of examples in the Fulham match where we see the fullbacks, who are going to be crucial to this, overlapping into dangerous areas in the final third and working really nicely in tandem with our wingers. So where previously maybe our wingers would have been wider and holding the width for the team, we're seeing the wingers coming all the way inside and playing more half space roles and doing something called pinning, where you pin the fullbacks in. So instead of their markers being able to drift out into the wide areas, they're forced in closer to the centre backs. That means that the defensive team becomes extremely narrow and creates the space on the outside. So it's always about numerical overloads, right? And by having that 5 across the front line, or even a 6 maybe if a midfielder joins, but mainly with West Ham, I think we'll see it as a 5. When you're coming up against teams that defend with a 4, it's where's that spare man going to be? And 99% of the time, I think under Lopetegui, the spare man is probably going to be one of the fullbacks in the wide space with a huge amount of room to work with. And what we're looking for in those moments is can Paqueta, instead of trying to play, the most dangerous and most threatening pass. So there's one example in the second half where he tries to clip the ball over to Somerville instead of finding Wan-Bissaka on the outside. It's actually, Somerville's done his job. He's pinned the fullback all the way inside. So actually what you can do is then go and play a really simple pass out to Wan-Bissaka. And I can sort of explain this a little bit better using the board, where this is exactly the example I wanted to look at as well, where we're talking about that option to play Wan-Bissaka in on the outside. This is when Sofel's come on and Bowen's playing through the middle, and we've got Kudus and Somerville in the wide areas. And in this example, Fulham are quite deep. And if we were set up as this, with the wingers on the outside, you can see that there isn't really an open lane for Paqueta, if the ball's here, to play it out to Wan-Bissaka. But what we see in this example is actually the wingers coming all the way inside, actually quite close to the centre-backs, and that pulls the full-backs all the way in. Somerville does a really excellent job. Instead of making this run, he actually comes in on this side and starts to pull inside. And as he gets into this space, Tete actually goes all the way with him. And Tete ends up almost overlapping with Andersen in this situation. And Tete is really, really, really narrow. As a result, because our wingers can drop off and receive in these dangerous sorts of pockets, we actually also see Fulham's midfielders dropping all the way off to try and really protect against those options to access the wide players. So you've got Somerville and Tete are almost on top of each other by the end of this. And Paqueta ends up with a little bit of space to be able to play a dangerous pass. And what he ends up doing is he ends up looking for this option to Somerville where he can play the ball over the top. Really difficult, right? Because he has to be inch perfect with the pass if he's going to put it over into this area. And Somerville's going to have to take a perfect first touch. There's every chance that Leonard's actually going to be able to get out and make a sweeping action and be able to stop that quite easily. Where really what we need are creative players, much like Paqueta, but there were also situations where it happened with Bowen in the game and other players. What we need them to be looking for is actually in these situations, the fullbacks suddenly become really, really attractive passing options. So there's this really simple lane to pass out wide. And what you then get is your striker and your far side winger, if I can actually access them because all the players are so close together, and your far side fullback as well, all coming in across the back post. So if the ball goes out here to Wan-Bissaka, he's able to play those cutbacks and you have loads of options ready. 3 different lanes of players basically able to attack that cross. So if it doesn't get met by Bowen, Kudus is going to be following in behind that. Kudus might be able to meet it. And if it doesn't get met by Kudus, Foul will be again in behind that to try and meet it. And then also with the defenders, you can actually easily generate own goals in these situations. You might get Adamsen throwing a leg out and the ball goes in, or the same with Bassi or Robinson. So
it's the sort of thing that's plagued us for years. Years and years and years.
So this is exactly the kind of attack that we want to see the team starting to look for. And in the Fulham game, what we see a lot is us generating the right situations to get those attacks, but actually the decision making in those final moments not being quite right to be able to play the right pass and actually find the most dangerous opportunity. Yeah,
that makes perfect sense. I mean, it's like I say, it's the kind of situation that has been plaguing us for years. The amount of times where the times I would be most panicked when we were under David Moyes and we were sat deep in that low block and we were all just huddled together like turtle formation, like ancient Romans, trying to stop them coming through, was those times you'd get the pass out to the fullback or maybe a winger if they find themselves in that position, and you pull it across, and then you imagine as a centre-back you just don't know what to do. You're facing the wrong way, the ball's coming at you at 1,000,000 miles an hour. You know for a fact if you take a weird touch here, it's going in the back of the net. The goalkeeper's not going to have time to react. And then, or in a positive sense, you have in that example Bowen or whoever else could us in that instance running on the back of it, and again it's a simple tap in at that point.
Thank you for watching. That was an excerpt from our weekly Patreon Q&A show where you can get your own questions answered each week after the game. You can subscribe first 7 days free over on patreon.com/Analytics United. It comes out midweek alongside our preview content ahead of the upcoming game. We're of course looking at Chelsea over there right now with pre-match pack and the full preview podcast. We hope to see you there.